Once, there was a lonely little girl named Lily, who lived in a big, grey world. Only the world wasn't really grey, not to Lily. It was full of colour and wonder and magic, because she squinted her eyes and tilted her head just so. If she squinted at just the right angle, Lily could see everything the way it should be. And she was happy. Lily played with her toys and read her books and played dress-ups and built forts and drew pictures and played with her imaginary friend. Why, she even knew an actual fairy princess who came and babysat her sometimes. One day a new boy came to live next door. He was a little older than Lily, but she thought he might like to play too. "Hello, boy," said Lily. "Would you like to come and play in my fairy kingdom?" But the new boy looked at her and laughed. "I don't believe in fairies, ha ha ha," he said. "I'm a big boy. That's not reality." Reality? Lily asked, puzzled. "What's reality?" "Reality," said new boy, "is what's real and not what's make-believe. Like Sinterklaas and the Oosterbansky. They're not real. They're just pretend." Lily stared at the new boy in fright. She burst into tears and ran home as fast as her little legs would take her. She ran past her kingdom, past her enchanted forest, past her unicorns and dragons, past all her knights and handmaidens and subjects, all the way to the deepest, darkest cavern of her kingdom, where she curled up and hid from the world to have a good, long cry. "Lily! Lily!" her friends asked, crowding round behind her in concern. "What's wrong?" "Go away!" cried Lily, turning to confront them. "You're not real! You're just pretend!" But there was no one there. And neither was the cavern, and neither were the unicorns and dragons, and neither was the enchanted forest, and neither was her very own kingdom. "It's not real," she whispered to herself. "None of it was real at all." And she looked around at the grey, grey world, and hid her head in her hands, and cried. Lily cried for days, for her world was empty and sad. Without her imaginary friends and her magical kingdom, she had nothing left. All that there was in the world was grey. No colours or fun at all. Then one day, it was a babysitting day, only it wasn't a fairy princess who came to sit, just a plain old, ordinary person. "Why, hello, Princess Lily," said the plain old ordinary person. "Would you like to fight dragons today? Or have tea at the Fairy Queen's castle?" But Lily just looked at her and sighed. "I don't believe in fairies," she said. "I'm a big girl now. The new boys said that it's not reality." And a lonely teardrop crept down her rosy cheek. "Oh, Lily," said the plain old ordinary person, as she wrapped Lily up in a great big hug. "Reality is just what you make of it, Princess Lily. If you let go of all your make-believes, you'll have nothing left. Your pretends are all your hopes and dreams and imaginings all dressed up in play. Don't let the world tell you what's real and what's not. Only you can decide that for yourself." And as she said this, Lily's eyes widened, for a crown had slowly appeared on her head. She wasn't plain and ordinary at all. She was the Fairy Queen all along. And behind her, the whole wide world had appeared before Lily's eyes. Her fairy kingdom and all her friends were there, and the unicorns and dragons, the mermaids, the castle, and much more besides. They were all there, smiling at her, beckoning her to come and play. They had always been there waiting for her, but now she could see them again. With a squint and a tilt of her head, and with a cry, a hop, a skip and a jump for joy, she sped into their wide open arms to play. And she hasn't left since. Thank you so much for listening. As I'm sure you could tell, I decided to read something a little bit different for today's door. You have just listened to an original story submitted to me by a Fox fan, by one of my listeners. So I feel extremely lucky to be able to share that with you. The author of that story recalled that in my little chat at the end of one of the earlier Advent Calendar stories, I had mentioned that maybe we should have a go at writing our own fables, and they contacted me on Discord and said, "I kinda wrote a very simple kid's story years ago, and I've always been too lazy to illustrate and publish it. Would you be interested in taking a look?" And they sent it through to me. And here we have it. They also said to me that they'd been a bit unsure about it, which was one of the reasons why they hadn't pursued perhaps illustrating and publishing it themselves. But personally, I really enjoyed reading that. And I hope you did too. Please do leave a comment with your thoughts and feelings on today's story. And if you have an original story that you've written yourself and you would like to hear me read it here on the channel, please do get in contact with me. You can leave a comment here, you can send an email, say hello on Discord or Patreon. The links for all those things are always in my video descriptions. And who knows? I have been contacted quite a lot in the past with various stories from some of my listeners, but every time I'd always just felt too busy, consumed with other projects, other things, and I suppose I let a few opportunities pass me by, but this was just perfect timing for me. I just reached the end of the 17 Aesop fables that I'd particularly wanted to read to you, and before sharing a few extra Aesop fables that you've requested through the comments over these last few days, and before I start with the wintry Christmas tales, this just felt like a perfect opportunity to try something a little different and to read one of your stories. So thank you so very much again. It's been an absolute pleasure to read all your comments coming in on yesterday's story, The Fox and the Crow. And I have to just add that although it was a victory for the fox, I think you could certainly argue that it wasn't a moral victory. The fox was certainly very deceitful and tricked that poor little crow into dropping her cheese. I do sort of think it was worth it, though. If the fox hadn't have challenged the crow, we would have never heard the crow's beautiful singing voice. In terms of the moral, it seemed to be a warning against listening to flatterers. As Elizabeth put it, apparently flattery will get the fox a breakfast and leave the crow hanging out to dry. Well, I'll leave it there for today. You come back for day 18, and we'll see what's hiding under that door. For these last few days, almost anything could be lying in store. You take care now, and I'll read to you soon.